My new title is Token Conservative.
It's an old title.
But surprisingly, I think you'll see that almost everything I'm going to say is similar to what's been said before. That's not only because I can't think up things on my own, but it's because there's a surprising degree of agreement, I think, across many of the policy areas that we want to talk about. I'm going to show you at least 1.5 exceptions, but I think those exceptions are malleable and could change. I want to do two things. First, I want to make a very important point that's been implied by several presentations, but I want to make it very clear to you, and I think the members should understand this, and that is we're swimming upstream. Many forces in our society that are more or less out of control push the poverty rate up. And we're modestly successful at best in changing those underlying forces. And the second thing I want to quickly lay on the table, 5 strategies that I think could be effective in reducing poverty. So if you look at the handout, I hope everybody has that. The first one shows the employment to population ratio. And everybody on this panel, this is an example of the agreement, work is crucial. And we have had a huge increase in work among women in our society, not just middle-class women, but also low-income women. That's due in part to welfare reform. It's due in part to the incentives of the ITC and other changes I'm going to mention in a few minutes. But government played a major role in that, in encouraging, cajoling, pushing, forcing low-income others to go into the labor force, and they did exactly what the public expected them to do and what policy expected them to do, and that is they went in the labor force. I'd say at least 1.5 million mothers. But for males, we don't have that. Male labor rates, in many cases in Europe, it's the same thing. In the United States are declining somewhat, but work rates for young black males are plummeting and are at historic lows, and it makes it extremely difficult for anybody who has one of those males as a father not to live in poverty. So work is a key here, and I want to emphasize that. I think that's the single best defense against poverty. Jared might not have meant to make it quite so clear, but he basically said the same thing. Second, this is the liberal side of this presentation. Wages are a huge problem. If you look at those wages, they're really just astounding. I mean, they're astounding. That at the 10th percentile, that wages went down for a decade and a half, and they came back up in that wonderful period that Jared was talking about. He forgot to say, but I'll say, during the Clinton administration. And it was a glorious time. People went to work in droves, and yet wages went up. So it was really a great story. But guess what? Look at the chart. They came back to where they were 30 years before. Think of that, 30 years at the 10th percentile, work hard, 40 hours a week, and in effect, your wages did not increase at all. And I've been following Jared for many years, and he has taught me that we will always have people at the 10th percentile. So we have a big problem in our economy. I know Republicans are reluctant to admit this, but it's obvious. It's been obvious for 3 decades. I don't have an answer. I don't think anybody here has an answer. I'm going to give you a partial answer in a few minutes. The next issue is family composition, and this is one that is somewhat controversial. We have figured out every way to get kids in single parent, especially female-headed families, that it can be done. Our non-marital birth rates have been rising. They actually have leveled off a little bit since the mid-1990s, especially for blacks, but they're all at historic highs. So we have a lot of kids that are born outside marriage. And then we have a high divorce rate, and our divorce rate is much higher among low-income people than it is among middle-class people. It's been more or less stable for the nation as a whole since roughly the mid-1980s, but at a very high level. So between divorce and non-marital births, almost 30% of our children live in a female-headed family, as you can see by the chart that I've provided for you. And then if you look at the next chart, you see the poverty rates among married couple families and female-headed families. And the difference year after year after year is 4, 5, 6 times more likely to be in poverty if you're in a female-headed family. So if we're putting more and more of our kids in female-headed families, naturally, we're swimming upstream. It's really a big problem. So as many of you know, there have been initiatives in the Bush administration to do something about this, and I want to make a comment about those in just a minute. Immigration plays a role here. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but there are 2 nifty charts, especially the second one is from Borhaus at Harvard. And what it shows is the dramatic decline since since World War II, in the education level and the wages, relative to American workers of immigrants, and it has declined greatly. And it's declined so much that now average wages are less than American average wages. It's because we have so many low-skilled, low-educated immigrants. And even if their kids do better, which they will on average, they definitely will do better, but they still will not get to the average. So this is a big problem. It goes way beyond poverty, but I would say it adds at least a percentage point a year to poverty. So I'll say a few words about that in just a minute. And then I want to make a half a point here, which is if anybody is laboring on the assumption if we just spend more money, everything's going to be fine, that's not true. We spend more money all the time, as measured in constant dollars, as a percentage of the federal budget, as a percentage of GDP. We spend more and more every year on means-tested programs. Those are programs directed toward low-income families. We need to spend our money more wisely. We might have to spend more. I'm not saying necessarily that we shouldn't spend more, but we need to spend our money more wisely. So, 5 strategies. First, work. And this is bipartisan, because work support, as several people here have implied, we have a magnificent system that has work gangbusters, and every single element of that system has been changed over the last 20 years. Medicaid, huge changes so that low-income working people get Medicaid. In the old days, they threw them off as soon as they started working. Food stamps have been changed, a bunch of changes in the Farm Bill in 2002, much easier for working families now to get food stamps. We doubled the spending on daycare over roughly a 3-year period in the mid-1990s. So we have a number of programs that are really friendly to low-income working families and greatly reduce their poverty rate. Not according to the official measure, but according to the actual resources they have at their disposal. So we need to nurture the work and work support system. We need to have strong requirements in all our programs that people should work, and then when they go to work, we need to support them with government benefits. We're doing a fairly good job of that now. There are a number of ways to improve it. I would say the most important thing, which I know Mark will agree with, because he wrote a chapter for a book we did on this, we need more money for daycare. I think that's definite. Mark would like to spend $20 billion. I have a doubt that we're going to spend $20 billion on daycare starting next year. But the second is family composition. This one is somewhat controversial. Everybody loves families. Everybody thinks people should be married before they have babies and so forth. But we're reluctant to do anything about it in policy terms. And an argument frequently used, know how to promote marriage. And that's true. But we didn't know how to reduce poverty when we started in 1965 either. And the very same people making an argument about, well, we don't know how to affect marriage and non-marital births, were the people back in 65 saying, we got to do something about poverty, so let's try a whole bunch of things. And that's what we should be doing. That's what we're doing. And I hope that we continue, especially if Obama's elected and we have a Democratic president. We'll definitely have a Democratic House and Senate without question, probably considerably more Democratic than it is now. And I hope that they do not kill the initiatives in the Bush administration. We should let them run their course. Some of them are experimental. The scholarly world, including people who are pretty far left, support this because we're going to learn something about whether these programs actually have impacts. We should change our immigration laws. We should gradually, over a period of a decade or so, raise the education level of people we admit to the country. The problem here is that we put way too much emphasis on family relationship and much less on education. We have lots of highly educated people who would like to come to America, and they get held out. And I shouldn't say we allow, but we have lots of illegal immigrants, and our policy is totally ineffective in keeping illegal immigrants out. So we need to change our immigration laws. And by the way, I think that the Kennedy, McCain, you've heard of McCain, right? I think that the bill that they supported, it really took very important steps in this direction. I hope those features of gradually increasing the education level of immigrants are retained. Post-secondary education is a super important strategy, especially if we want to address our policy to income distribution and to economic mobility in addition to just reducing poverty. Because in this country, we are not going to do anything serious because we're always going to have those people at the 10th percentile. And unless they're more highly educated, the 10th percentile is always going to be a low, crummy level of wages. Unless we can help people at the bottom get more education and improve the quality of their skills and the income that they can earn so that they can be paid more because they're more valuable to employees, we are not going to be able to crack this problem of always having difficulty down there at the bottom. So post-secondary education, There are a whole bunch of strategies. I think that the bill that we passed in July was really first rate. It did a number of important things. If anybody wants to talk about it, I'll give you some specific ideas. And finally, I think everybody agrees, so I can cover it in about 10 seconds. Quality preschool. The only point I would make about this is we know from very good random assignment studies that quality preschool can have lifetime impacts. It really can make a big difference. But Head Start is not doing it. And this is the old story in education. In fact, all interventions should do something terrific with a small group. And then when you try to expand it and make it national or regional, you get much lower results and sometimes not even significant results. So what we need to figure out how to do is to nurture lots and lots and lots of high-quality preschool programs that are the equivalent of those experimental programs that produce good results. We can't do it yet, but we need to keep working on it. Thanks.